Welcome everyone to the first TTC of this year and our first mentoring session overall. So this is really one of the key ideas that Matteo and MD had, that really this forum would also serve as a community where junior and senior faculty can get together and really learn from each other. Where we can, as junior faculty, get the exposure to really present our own research, what we had in the previous two, but then also to hear advice, right? To hear the insights from senior faculty, to make connections, and really happy that today Srinivas Garimella agreed to give a presentation on navigating the tenure journey. I'm really glad that so many junior and also senior faculty are on the call. I think that will make for some very interesting conversations afterwards. And I know Andre will have a few comments. So probably everyone here knows Srinivas, so I'll make the introduction very, very brief. So he's a professor at Georgia Tech. His research really focuses on heat transfer, obviously phase change heat transfer, but then also refrigeration system, a lot of kind of practical applications for cooling and heating. He has, I need to cheat here, he has had more than 75 postdocs, PhD, and master students, and more than 250 journal publications. So by all standards, he's definitely been extremely successful. But what is also very important to us today is that he's also been very successful in mentoring junior faculty, both at Georgia Tech, but also outside Georgia Tech, just faculty within the heat transfer community. So without further ado, I'm really happy to give it to Srinivas. I would ask you all to mute yourselves. If you have a question during the talk, you can unmute and ask, or obviously you can use the chat. And we'll have this presentation by Srinivas. We'll see how long it takes. And then afterwards, we'll have open conversation Q&A where you can ask questions either again through unmuting or in the chat. And hopefully some of the other senior faculty will then also chime in and share their experiences. So Srinivas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Patty, Matteo, and Mohammed for organizing this. And thank you also to Ying Sun. This is sort of a nervous time for me because I've never given a talk like this. And I'm wondering why 43 people didn't have anything better to do than to show up here. So I'll hopefully not waste your time too much. So the topic that I have chosen is to give you some of my own thoughts about how to navigate the tenure journey. And I happen to have the distinction of getting tenure, giving it up, and then getting it back again. I started my my teaching career at Western Michigan University. And then while I was a tenure track professor, I moved to Iowa State University, got tenure, got promoted to full professor about the time that the Georgia Tech offer came. Georgia Tech said that we only hire people without tenure, and we'll hire you as an associate professor. And I was foolish enough to give up a tenured full professor position and come to Georgia Tech. So I've done this tenure business twice. I guess I'm not that good, so I have to try so hard to get it. So I'll relate to you some of the lessons learned. But the very first thing I'd like to tell you is the worst thing you can do to get tenure is to worry about it. The tenure journey lasts about 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And this is no way to live. You can't just keep thinking about, if I'm going to get a cup of coffee, is that contributing to my tenure or not? And I see people, I see young faculty just petrified about it, and it's not good. So stop worrying about tenure. Okay, that's the main message here. The slides need to move, so I don't know, do I have control of this? Okay, good. So there's no one way to handle this, and you have to pick the way that works for you. I have to say that these are my opinions, and there is no, one way, and this is not gospel. But at least if it provokes some introspection and some new perspectives, hopefully these are some useful thoughts for you. So I have titled this slide A Condition: Diabetes, heart condition, high cholesterol, arthritis, obesity, hypertension. Many of you are less scared of this than of this thing. And if I can somehow achieve some reduction in the fear of the tenure track, I think I've done my job. First of all, do you want it? How bad do you want it? Whether you want it is something that you need to establish. Why you want it is to establish, is something that you need to think about. And how badly do you want it? That means how hard are you willing to work for it? This is not an activity that you sort of casually take over. It has to be an all-consuming passion. And it's not just a job, it's a calling. And you have to recognize that to be able to be happy doing this. Are you qualified to do this? Well, nobody can answer this except yourself. You have to have that faith in yourself to be able to get there. And remember that it's a marketplace of ideas and effort. Okay, those are the two things that matter. Everything else is window dressing. And so this is the message that I'd like to convey through the rest of the presentation. Always keep in mind that nobody wants to deny you tenure. We go through so much effort finding candidates, doing the whole recruitment process, providing startup funds, providing release time, all of that. That is foolish to think that the institute is trying to screw you and not give you tenure. It doesn't happen like that. Okay. No one is out to get you. In most places, the vast majority get tenure. Hell, I mean, they even gave Nenad Milkovich tenure at UIUC. So, how bad can it be? You'll get tenure, don't worry. I can almost guarantee that you will get tenure. Keep that in mind. You are in charge. You determine whether you get tenure or not. And since you have an interest in getting tenure, you'll get it. Okay, so how do you prepare for this? Now, it's too late for most of you who are already in the faculty position, but this is just some advice that you can give to your students. Before the tenure journey, it actually starts about 2 or 3 years before that. And about half the tenure effort can actually be finished before you show up. For example, as a graduate student, you can teach a class, you can prepare your class outlines, notes, homework sets, exams, all of that. You can do this ahead of time. You can also join ASME and other societies, organize symposium sessions while you're graduate students and so on, so that people know who you are. And I knew Patty when she was in that stage. And that's why she's on the way to this. You can even write your research and educational plans for the NSF Career Award, which most of you will apply for. All of this groundwork you can do before. You can also write 3 white papers with budgets and so on before you show up, so that the day you show up on campus, you can start on the process of building your research program. You can also order long lead time equipment, prepare your lab poster templates, capability statements. Just sort of who you are kind of stuff is something that you can establish well before you show up. By doing this, you will get a running start and not have to start from ground zero. And you can eliminate most of that uncertainty in the tenure process. Once you show up, one of the things that I notice is the moment some faculty show up, they sort of retreat into their shell. They seem like they don't know what they're doing. They're scared and so on. But when you hear the seminar of the faculty candidate, when he or she shows up for the interview, all of them are world changers. They not only want to change the world, they have already changed the world, and they're heading towards the changing the universe. So what happened? I mean, if you were so great, then act like you know that, because you had all those wonderful ideas. There's no need to be scared. There's no need to be scared just because you are an assistant professor. Just have your faith in yourself. So if that happens, if you end up sort of being paralyzed when you show up, think about it. Why are you feeling like you have this deer in the headlight syndrome? Did you do that step 0 that I outlined in the previous slide or not? If you didn't, then start doing those things. You claimed you wanted to be a leader. I mean, you said that you will change the world. So this is your chance. You got that opportunity. Lead. What are some steps? Well, first of all, you have to articulate your plan, and softly, in a nuanced manner. Yes, you have high potential and so on, but there are many faculty in the department who have been through that journey. So you have to find that right tone of expressing who you are and what you want to be. Identify your collaborators. Meet with sponsored program staff. Don't just email them, okay? These are real people too. They're not there just to solve all your delayed proposal submissions. You know, the proposal is due at 5 p.m. and you show up at 4. You send them an email at 4 and say, please submit this. It doesn't happen like that. Develop a personal relationship with those people, because they, first of all, they work very, very hard. And it's good to associate a name with a face. Take the initiative. Senior faculty are busy too. I want to dwell on this a little bit. There are many people who 2 years or 3 years into the tenure journey, they say, well, no faculty member approached me to help me, and I was just kind of feeling lost. Yes, it's unfortunate that it happened, but what steps did you take to approach them? The faculty are not averse to helping you, but they have their own busy careers and so on. If you knock on their door, if you send them an email saying, hey, I have some questions about something or the other, can you help me? I would be shocked if anyone refuses to do that. And this is also a means of building those collaborations. You have to take the first step. And that leads to beautiful collaborations career long. So please take the initiative. Don't just assume that they will knock on your door. Okay? In places like Georgia Tech, we are spread out around 13 or 14 buildings, and it's hard to actually walk over there. But you take the initiative, and you'll be rewarded in great measure. You've already said all these things about your teaching plan and your, the courses you want to teach and so on when you applied. And so if you did all those things properly, you can start executing your teaching and teaching plan, your course responsibilities, and so on quite well. Do not disappear in your office and hope that someone will come and discover you. Make friends both inside and outside the school. You want to have a rewarding experience. And then in faculty meetings, don't just disappear. After you've heard what's going on and have formed an educated opinion, talk. People are looking for those fresh perspectives. Nobody's going to censure you for expressing your opinions. We want those opinions. So don't shy away, but make sure you've heard what's going on before you express your opinions. These are just some first initial steps of how to introduce yourself to your new department. One of the things that I notice some faculty do is they start looking over their shoulders. What do I mean by that? My colleague got a bigger startup package. My colleague's office is nicer than mine. The colleague made a splash. He or she was on the department or institute newsletter more times than you are. The colleague got lab space a month earlier than I did. So the question then is, are you more interested in his or her tenure or in yours? Just focus on yourself. Finding reasons and justifications to fail by looking over your shoulder will actually ensure failure, because you're not focusing on yourself. So avoid that pitfall. And so speaking of startup, plan what you want to do while you're still before your faculty position. ask for the startup to enable that with justification. Whatever you're asking for, provide the justification for it. And remember that a startup package is not just an all-you-can-eat and squeeze from the institute buffet. An excessive startup that somehow you squeeze out of the institute will mean that you have implicitly promised a lot of things to the new institute, and it adds pressure. You will feel starting that pressure. So ask for what you need and don't view this as some grab activity. Most places do provide the startup that you need to get you going. It's also in their best interest because they hired you, they want you to succeed, so they will provide you what you need. But remember that startup is just that. It's a startup package. It's not some long-term retirement package. If you want to know what my startup was, in 1994, I joined Western Michigan University. What was my teaching release or teaching load in the very first semester? I taught the heat transfer class on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at noon. And I taught the HVAC systems class on Tuesday and Thursday, and that was a 4-credit class, 1.5-hour classes or maybe 2-hour classes. And so that was the teaching so-called release. I didn't get any release. Okay? Every single day of mine was booked with teaching. What summer support did I get? I got that much summer support, 0. What startup funds did I get? My startup funds, the total package was a grand total of $10,000. Of that, I had to spend $5,000 to get my office computer and my printer. So I was left with $5,000. I bought a data acquisition card with it, one data acquisition card, not a data acquisition system. That's where I started, and I've built what I have done from there. How much graduate student support did I have? 0. We had just started a PhD program, and there was no graduate student support. So it is possible. So startup, please remember, is not the be-all and end-all of a career. The primary question in many of your minds is it teaching, research, or service? What counts? All of it counts. When you're eating, do you need proteins, vitamins, carbohydrates? Well, you need all of those. It's a portfolio. It's not a specific magic formula, but it's a portfolio. The question that comes up at tenure time is, do you matter? It doesn't matter how you matter. Do you matter? That is the question. And there are many paths and combinations of these items to achieve that success. If you visualize a mountain, you can climb to the top of the mountain from many spots around the circumference. You pick your circumference, and then you make your plan and climb up. Adapt that plan as you need. There is no one formula. And make it your mountain. It's not someone else's prescription. Anything you decide and pursue, by and large, is okay. Teaching. What will my teaching load be is the common question. I have an issue with that word load. A teaching load is not a load. You are a faculty member. You are in a teaching profession. It's in your best interest to not think of teaching as a load. It is not a nuisance. It is not optional. If you don't enjoy anything about teaching, check your premises. Why are you here? Resign. If you really don't enjoy anything about teaching, then you're in the wrong place. You can go to a national lab, you can go to other places and just focus on research. The teaching actually provides you a lot of self-satisfaction. When your research is, say, temporarily going down the tank, teaching can be a wonderful source of satisfaction. There are few things in life that beat the satisfaction of seeing the students looking really lost at the beginning of the semester and gradually through the semester, through your input, actually get it. You see that spark in their eyes. And if that doesn't make you happy, you're in the wrong profession. So teaching is important. Well, the question was posed to me by the organizers that this was the question you guys asked. What is the right balance between teaching and research duties is teaching a good investment for research. This sort of transactional approach is not a good long-term approach. This is a higher calling. A faculty position isn't that sort of transaction. You're not teaching because it'll be a good investment for your research. You're teaching because you have a smile on your face when you're teaching. You enjoy that. That's the way to look at it. And yes, there are some benefits for research, because if you are teaching well and you've inspired some students in your undergraduate classes, many of them end up becoming your graduate students. You've already seen them, you know what their capabilities are, and so that forms a wonderful source of graduate students. In my initial stages of my career, that's how I got most of my graduate students. So one question you need to ask in this profession is, who are you? Are you a player? Are you a coach? Are you a research advisor? Are you a boss? Are you a friend? Or are you a manager? And my answer to this question is, you are all of the above except the player. Okay? You're not the player anymore. You're not the star. You are making stars. You're making your students stars. You are not the star. You have to quit this notion of you being the most important person, and it will pay you back down the road in loads and heaps. So you're not the player, but you are all of those things, and you are a mentor. A mentor means you're not just advising on that research project, but you're taking care of that person's growth as a human being. You're taking care of career counseling. You're giving them advice. You're giving them a shoulder when they are in tough times. This is your role. I view being a professor is to be in the business of collaborative human transformation. It is not how many papers you're writing. The papers will come. If you focus on papers, that's the wrong approach. You have to enjoy working with your students and making them into the next career professionals. If you're able to achieve that, all those other things will automatically happen. Who you should not be. You are not the reaper of the harvest of your students' toil. Students are not your tools. If you treat them as tools, then tools break, and tools will not give you more than what you demand of them. If you tell them, here's the problem, work hard, get me results, and don't ask me stupid questions, that's the worst approach you can take. If you tell them, I will fire you if you don't give me results by this date, that's not going to make them work any harder or better. One of the common sort of syndromes, even if you don't actually say it, you're thinking this to yourself. How can you be so stupid to your graduate student? When I was a student, I knew everything. No, you didn't know everything. You actually graduated with a bunch of others, and few of them ended up being faculty. So you are a special person, but you shouldn't treat a student who's actually seeking knowledge as being incompetent. Provide that, answer those questions. So why are you? I mean, really, this is a philosophical question that will guide you in this process. Your core beliefs matter. And one of the things I always do is I have long conversations with my students, and I actually say all these things to them. We have long conversations about what their driving forces are, what my driving forces are, and so on. Your role is to guide. You won't do the student's work. You shouldn't also be in a position of chasing the student to do the work. Be careful when you recruit the students, and I'll have more to say about that later. But if you're just constantly chasing the student, then you found the wrong student, or you have found the wrong interaction mechanism. By conversely, trusting the advisor is not optional. You have to demand essentially this full trust. The student cannot be guided without trusting the advisor, which means also that you have to earn that trust. You have to convey to them that it is their interest that is topmost in your mind. And don't be afraid to provide criticism to your students. A caring advisor is not someone who's always showering praise. An advisor who doesn't point out flaws is not really an advisor at all. So don't be scared of providing feedback. Also, funding is an advisor's business and responsibility. Never threaten your student that you will withdraw the funds if they don't perform. That is just a bad taste in their mouth, and they're scared, especially if they're international students. It's not just a question of losing their funding, but it's losing their ability to stay in the country and so on and so forth. These kinds of threats don't work. They will just antagonize them, they will alienate them, and so on. And you have to live with them for 5, 6, 7 years. You have to enjoy that. Don't do this. Remember that an advisor is a champion for life, and the student has to earn that with an absolute commitment to excel. So it's a combination of your expectations of them and your actions towards them. That's the combination that actually works. Now, in my own philosophy, this doesn't have to be your philosophy, but as an advisor, few things are more important to me than the comprehensive welfare of my students. My family is, of course, more important, but not significantly more. As my PhD students, you become part of my extended family. This is what I tell my students. This is how they are. For example, and Patty asked me to throw in a few of my stories, so I'll tell you a few stories here. When I moved from Iowa State to Georgia Tech, I made sure that I was able to arrange through the university transportation of all their stuff. They rented, I brought 10 graduate students with me to Georgia Tech, and I arranged for them to have a U-Haul that they could bring all their stuff. And when they showed up here, I had bought a house, and I was moving into the house, and they were still looking for accommodations. And so for the first few days, they all stayed in our house. We all spent that time in sleeping bags, and we had a good old time discovering the place. This is how you build community. They come to our house every month or so, every couple of months. I know when they get married. I attend their such functions and so on. So it's a family atmosphere, and that's what builds this sense of community. Also, an advisor's agenda is and can never be in conflict or orthogonal to the student's agenda. You have to make sure that your agenda and his or her agenda is the same. That's what leads to that harmony. And it's those kinds of sort of subtle things that matter. So these are some sort of expectation setting and conversations you must have with your student. It's not always research conversations. You hired that student because he or she was bright, had excellent credentials. Now the question is the other aspects, okay? First, you have to convey to the student a PhD requires a significant intellectual contribution, and you cannot get it without sustained hard effort and several periods of mind and body numbing exhaustion. Please do not sugarcoat it. State it on the first day the student arrives, and preferably when you're trying to recruit that student. Don't try to recruit a student by saying life will be good and happy and everything will be fun. Gauge their receptivity to this, because as PhD holders, you have been through this. So there's no point in hiding this. Tell them that this is what is needed. If they're not ready for it, they're not ready for you. Some subtle points. Not all students come with the same background, but the quality of a PhD from my lab, every PhD that graduates from my lab has approximately the same quality. Now the starting points are different, and so each student has to function differently to get there. How do you get there? With constant effort. So you can either pay the entrance fees of adequate credentials, that's just an entrance fee, but then the recurring fee of steady, high quality effort. Or you can try to pay a lump sum at the end and make up for the poor regular effort throughout the PhD process, and that approach never really works. So make sure you're monitoring the student's progress and emphasizing this aspect. Drafts. Never accept from the student a draft, a so-called draft. Whatever that student submits must be something that he or she thinks can be directly sent to the journal, to the sponsor, or whatever, wherever it is due. This concept of a draft, let's throw something together, and then we'll fix it never works, because there's really only one first time, and the second, third, fourth, and so on will never bring it up to that quality. And a little bit more on that. The upper bound on the PhD dissertation is set by the first draft. Now you can struggle and dissect every single word, every sentence, and so on, and just keep going back and forth with edits and so on, but it will never reach a level higher than it deserves with that first draft. So when the student first joins your group, emphasize this. Whatever that first assignment is that that student does, if the punctuation is not proper, if the margins are not proper, if the graph doesn't have the right type of axis labels and so on, that's the time to fix it. 4 years later is the wrong time to fix it. So keep this in mind. This is no time to be shy about what your expectations are. A little bit more about the faculty and PhD life for you and your student. Many faculty members and many PhD students often say, under ideal circumstances, I would have performed better. Unfortunately, the word if does not exist. Okay, there is no such thing as under ideal circumstances. It's not a theoretical problem. This is real life. So quit thinking about ideal circumstances and deal with the circumstances you have. You must be able to function in ambiguity. The point is that decisions are needed from you, and decisions are only needed when there is ambiguity. If everything is all spelled out and everything is all you can put a numerical value to each option there is, then you'll obviously pick the one that has the highest numerical value. So your judgment is needed, and if you're scared of exercising that judgment in that uncertainty, then you're not needed. So get comfortable with functioning in ambiguity. Don't expect someone to pat you on the back every single day. It's not a rewarding experience every single day. It's in fact tedium. This is the journey that you have to do to get to wherever you want to go. My job, as well as many of my colleagues' jobs, are 80% drudgery and 20% ecstasy. But it makes that ecstasy that much sweeter. Drudgery is the struggle that leads to this ecstasy. And so don't expect milk and honey every single day. If you keep listing your excuses for failure, it only guarantees that failure. And worse yet, it makes you comfortable with failure. And whether it is a PhD or whether it is a tenure track position, it's not the failure explanation business. So tell yourself this, and please tell your students that too, so that you are a team working together towards that. There are no long-term shortcuts. You can sort of gain some prominence in the beginning, and then you'll fall flat on your face if you think that there are these shortcuts. Excellence will always trump everything else. Tell your students that getting the PhD is just a small part of the career growth. They will never do that PhD problem again. Okay, that's just a preparation for the future. And so again, you have to convince them that they are going to be functioning as an intellectual leader. Prepare them for leadership. Therefore, do not treat them as your minions and give them dirty work so that you can be the leader. Sorry, you have to prepare them to be leaders. You're not just preparing them to be researchers or someone who can, install a thermocouple or something like that. Okay, how do you get good students? This is the most important task you will do. But you have to keep in mind, are you looking for a finished product that will just save your career and you can cash in on that person? Or are you looking for what your real job is, which is the process of transforming someone who has potential into something else? So don't look for a panacea for what you're about. These are not finished products. They are coming to you to become a finished product. When you are probing the recruits, make sure that you're having phone calls like this with them. Watch them, observe their eyes, observe their mannerisms, all of that, it counts. Pedigree and design labels are irrelevant. Don't say that this student graduated from a Georgia Tech or an MIT or a Stanford, and therefore he or she is great. No. Assess the individual, not the school. You're hiring that individual, not that school. The things you have to explore are the things that are not on the CV. You have to explore the drive, the passion, the initiative, the personality, the coachability. If that student comes across as a prima donna, that's probably not going to work for you, because the whole point is for you to coach that student. You can even gauge the attention to detail and precision in these interviews. And CV, GPA, GRE, these are okay, but they are sort of the initial entrance pass. The stuff that is above that is what counts in your selecting that student. Build your group organically. I've seen many young faculty who will come in and they want to put up that damn picture of their lab with 15 people in that picture. I'm sorry, if you're a first year or a second year faculty member, there's no way you can mentor 15 students, okay? So don't be in that rat race. Increase your group size in concert with your ability to mentor them, okay? For the first couple of years, I had 0 PhD students. I built them. I taught classes well. I hired them as undergraduate help and so on. And then I built them one by one. Just because your colleague hired, your so-called star colleague hired 7 students, don't feel compelled to do that. If you can do a good job mentoring 2 students and do well, that's the path you should choose. Too many poorly picked students can give you heartburn. I mean, you'll just be unhappy, you'll be miserable. Don't put yourself in that position. Okay, your research group. Set high expectations. That's the wrong time to be shy, and enforce them. Okay? You have to enforce them. Simple things, be on time. If you notice that the student said that he or she will meet you at 10 o'clock, if that student shows up even so much as 10:01, tell that student, please, I made time for you. I want you to be here at 10. And you try that once or twice, and if it isn't working, then that student is not for you. These are some things that you can, the framework you can establish, because you cannot establish the framework later on. And remember that you're not running a popularity contest for yourself, okay? You don't need to be popular. You will become popular down the road if the students are following your advice. So claiming your rightful place as the PI, as the boss of the group, it doesn't mean that you're doing anything bad. You should exercise that leadership, and that means establishing these ground rules. I've seen so many faculty, so many young colleagues start by trying to be their friends and being nice to them and soft and nice and so on, and just, you know, patting them on their back for just being able to go to the bathroom. It doesn't work, because that soft and nice will soon turn into soft and nasty, because you didn't establish that framework in the beginning and they're not performing, and then you have to get nasty. And that never works. Start firm and nice, and then you can become soft and nice down the road, because you won't need to be firm. Those principles will be ingrained in those students through that initial training, so you don't need to do that forcing anymore. So that approach is the better one. So establish a rigid framework so that the framework is not in doubt and you're flexible. The content is flexible. This is what will foster intellectual discussion. That's where you have flexibility, you have give and take and so on. But some of the framework issues, train the students and yourself early in the process. Don't treat students equally. This sounds controversial, but believe me, each student is a different person. If you are micromanaging every student to the same level, and if someone is a wonderful writer, even better than your writing skills, there's no point in just going and editing every single word of that student. Whereas if someone is a much better experimentalist, and then you keep, looking over that person's shoulder, it isn't very productive. So find out who that student is and then treat them according to what they need. Have some mechanisms for weekly monitoring. I have students submitting me weekly emails at, on Wednesdays, they send me something, and then every semester I ask them to write essays. At the end of the semester, they say how their semester was, what what they thought worked well, what didn't, what steps we together should take, and so on. And this really helps. And then I ask them to write right from the beginning. Every semester, they have to modify their sort of career plans so that they can see the evolution in themselves and they can see progress in themselves and they can feel happy that this path is actually leading to something. Don't skimp on that type of thing. That's where the career counseling comes into play. These are people you're dealing with, not tools. And the buck does stop with you. It's not with the students. Keep that in mind. And I see so many of my colleagues where they're just bitching about their students to me. I never complain about my students, never. That's something, that's a sacred trust I have between me and my students. And if you badmouth your students, your colleague will think, well, you know, you must be doing a bad job. Or, yeah, students are crap these days. That doesn't help anybody. Okay, do not do this. Because you're trying to develop them to be your colleagues. You have to seek opinion, you have to give decision-making power, even veto power. I have conversations with my students. When I hire a student into the group, the entire group, there's a consensus. If my students do not like that particular student through the interview process, I do not hire that student. It's plain and simple, because it has to be a cohesive group, and you have to give these people enough ownership. Okay, how do you deal with problem cases? Well, I mean, we all have some, within quotes, problem cases. What do you do? First of all, mentoring is a daily activity. Whatever that problem is, you have to have that sixth sense to fish out that problem well before it actually happens, and you have to take corrective measures right there. The student sometimes comes to your office evasively, isn't answering the questions as clearly as the previous day, and so on. You have to pay attention to them, look at them, really pay attention to their conversations. This is what matters. It's a daily activity. If a student is not performing, whose responsibility is it if that student doesn't work out? Yes, the student may be bad, but you hired that student. You owned that responsibility when you hired that student. You can guide, you can cajole, you can exhort, but do not ever try to humiliate the student. I've never seen a student change because he or she was screamed at. You can make the student realize his or her abilities. If you just keep focusing on you screwed up and you did this badly and so on, the poor student will just keep thinking, oh my God, I'm no good, I'm not worthy. And then that imposter syndrome starts kicking in. You can arrest that. Find the best in every student and enhance it. That's your job. Find the best in every student and enhance it. There are almost no students with no redeeming qualities. I've advised about 75 MS, PhD students and so on, and I've almost never fired one, never. At worst, what happens is that the student might come in for a PhD and things just aren't quite right. Maybe my style isn't compatible. Of course, I mean, I can fully understand that. I'm such a hard ass, I guess, that it didn't work for them. But what I do is I'll at least support them through a master's degree, fund them through that master's degree, and then they can go choose something else. I've never actually gotten rid of a student. I find a soft landing for that student, and it pays you back immensely. You will feel a lightened burden, and you will also gain respect among not just your students, but among the entire student community. These students interact with each other, so they know how each advisor is, so keep that in mind. The well-rounded experience. Who gives presentations to sponsors? Are there risks? Are there rewards? Make sure that the students are the ones that are presenting to sponsors. They will make mistakes, but the sponsors are quite understanding about these kinds of things. Let them present. They may make mistakes, it's fine. What do you do if a student becomes pregnant, gets sick, breaks her or his leg, has a sick family member, breaks up, has a divorce, wants to leave for a while? Every one of those things and more has happened to me, okay? And this is life. You're dealing with people. You're dealing with people over a 6-7 year period, 5, 6, 7 year period. These will happen. And you just have to make sure that, first of all students are familiar with every other student's project, so that temporarily, if someone else needs to step in and do that, it's okay. It's not a crime for a student to fall sick, okay? Let them get better. These are things that will help you in the long run. Seek help in writing proposals, even if the student's efforts are not useful in the beginning. My students write my proposals, and they do my budgets, and they do all the government forms too, even the DOE benefit programs and so on. My students write the proposals. All I do is just sit around and bullshit like this with you guys. But the point is, give them that experience, make these proposals their ideas so that when the project comes, they have an ownership, they are enthused about it. Of course, you have to fix many sentences, many words, even play around with the organization and so on. But if you start them at an early point, you don't need to deal with all these minute details. They'll take care of some of this, and it becomes a very nice experience. The students get a great sense of satisfaction when they do this. Take your students to conferences. I don't give the single paper conference talks anymore. My students do it. And that gives them a much more rewarding experience. It's lifelong guidance. It's not an abrupt handoff. Students must leave. So not only are you finishing the project, give them some ideas about the future so that when they become faculty, they are ready for it. Your students will always be known as your students. So if they're not performing well, it sort of impacts your reputation too. Nominate them for scholarships, awards, and so on. Create a community of your students in the world, so that there are so many cases where my previous students have hired my current students and so on. So it's a community. We have an actual group chat forum where we are always in contact with each other, no matter where in the world they are. I have a group of about 50 with whom I'm in contact with every single day at any time. You have to champion them for job opportunities forever, help them write their career statements, their proposals, and so on. Basically, seek the brighter people who are brighter than you, learn from them, revel in their success, but remember, it's reflected glory. You're getting the reflections from so many of them, okay? So that sum total will be plenty. Don't be so focused on your own glory. It'll come. They are your legacy. Research. You will have proposals that are rejected. It is not an invalidation. It's just the start of the revision phase. Nobel Prize winners, NAE members, NAS members, everyone has had their proposals rejected. This is no reason to get discouraged. Don't respond to every RFP just because you want to show activity or just because there's money to be had out there, even if you don't even know what that topic is about. I have seen people throw in the proposals, and they're crap. Those proposals are useless. They just waste your time. Never submit a proposal that you think is flawed, because someone will read that proposal and think that you have really no business in that field. So don't do this. It's not the quantity of the proposals, it's the quality. No sponsor is too small. My very first so-called grant was $357. It was the donation of a couple of Swage-Lock valves. Okay, that's how I started my career. Remember, my startup was basically zero. So this is how I built it. So you have to build each sponsor in your modified and evolving plans. A lot of young faculty complain about industry funding. Oh, industry doesn't want to listen to me. Industry doesn't want to fund me. I don't know how to go about doing it. Well, first of all, you have to listen to what the industry wants. The point is not to push your solution. And if you make 2 milligrams of some foo-foo powder and go around claiming that you've solved the energy crisis, you look silly. The point is to understand their problem and to solve it. That's how industry works. Cultivate a diverse portfolio so that you can even out fluctuations. Different research areas, government and industry sponsors, experimental and analytical and computational work, small and big ideas and projects so that you can fill in those details when some big project isn't working. You can make some smaller advances. Don't plan one big high pressure, high temperature, big pressure vessel as your one single research project, and then that damn thing fails and you have nothing to show for it. Don't try to be a hero. Diversify. If you set yourself up for a fall, you will fall. Okay. Relevance. It's important. You have to look for the nails, but not just keep pushing your hammer. I invented a hammer, so anything I see, I'm going to hammer. No, that doesn't work. Understand the problem. The NSF I-Core program that was instituted a few years ago has been a pretty good idea. If you get a chance to do that, do it, participate in it. They'll show you how to listen to the customer. Please don't chase your H-index and measure yourself by that H-index. H-index is crap, okay? This is my view. You are a complex individual. You're an accomplished individual. Don't reduce yourself to this one stupid number. It's like trying to get fit by eating a lot of junk food. Don't do this. And for example, if you are claiming to do building energy research, and then you won't publish in an ASHRAE journal because, oh, it's too applied and stuff like that, I will only publish in nano letters. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, don't chase the H-index. Do what satisfies you, do what makes you happy. You don't have to transform the universe with every single step that you take. It doesn't have to be that way. Failed projects, if some idea that you've been touting doesn't work, if that efficiency isn't working out to be that, don't fall in love with that idea. Learn how to detach from it and learn from it. There's still plenty of learning from that failed project. Don't fall in love with your project. Fall in love with yourself, but not with your project. Okay, growth and consolidate. How do you sort of diversify your program? I think I'm running late. I'll take another 5 minutes maybe. Establish your core discipline strengths. Okay, you are a heat transfer person or a fluid flow person, and so within that subtext you are something. Okay, establish that, the scientific principles, and then start with a couple of those fundamental research themes plus one application, and then add logical extensions. Logical extensions. Don't throw darts. Okay, it has to go. The next project has to sort of evolve from that first one. Always be aware of that future work aspect so that you can proceed in that direction. Roadblocks happen all the time. It happens to everyone. Equipment breaks. The roof leaks and dumps a lot of water on your expensive equipment. Electrical noise confounds your results. Your temperature measurements don't make any sense for months. The lab has a flood. The lab is relocated. All of this has happened to me. When I moved my lab from Western Michigan University to Iowa State University. Then I moved from Iowa State to Western Michigan, to Georgia Tech. The day I showed up with a full semi-truck of my lab equipment, they told me here that the lab that was slated for me was not available. They're going to put my stuff in storage. I said, nothing doing. I'm turning around and going back. And I put my foot down and they were able to make that space. Then I established my lab. 2 years later, they said, well, we're trying to sell this building. You have to move. And so I had to move to a completely different location just when I was getting started and reestablish that lab. This kind of crap happens. You just have to deal with it. But rarely does everything go wrong simultaneously. Some aspect of your life is working well. It's a multifaceted job. Focus on the other things. And it doesn't mean that you just shut down and just sit and become a martyr. That helps nobody. Do appeal to your colleagues and administration about this, but don't challenge their motives. It just puts them in an adversarial relationship that doesn't help you. Make them your allies. It's our problem. Let's solve it together. And of course, when someone helps you, thank them, reciprocate, and so on. Okay, some simpler questions. Service, leadership, and visibility. Service is not wasted effort. It can actually be a source of tremendous satisfaction. It's also a great marketing tool and a leadership opportunity. When you're participating in these kinds of forums, people notice you. If you volunteer for this kind of activity, this is where you get to know people. It's a chance to let your colleagues know how wonderful an individual you are. and it can give you an ego boost too. And it's an excellent source of external reference letters. Work life, I'm deliberately calling it imbalance, okay? The faculty position is not an ideal venue for work-life balance. I have to confess that. But if your work and life are not in balance, try to redefine your life. Okay, think about that. You co-opt your family becomes part of this enterprise. For example, a farmer, the entire family is working on that. You are in that kind of a job. You're all devoted to the cause. That's the shift in the mind that will help you deal with this. When you graduated with your PhD, you had options. Startup company, well, man, if you think about work-life balance, there's zero work-life balance in a startup company, and there's hardly any pay either. If you go to a major corporation, you don't want to go to the major corporation because you're sick of the bureaucracy and all of that, and you won't have individual enterprise. If you go to a national lab, same sort of thing, politics and so on. That's why you chose the faculty position, which means that you chose some degree of work-life imbalance, and you just have to live with it. But I'll provide you one perspective. Your work-life balance will come in a time-displaced, phase-lagged manner. Why? Because you'll have a little less balance for your first 3 years or so when you're getting established, but then plenty of balance for the rest of your life. You can do what you want. Have you heard of the pandemic? Yes, you did. Did people like me have to worry about whether they'll have a job after this pandemic? Not really. So you get plenty of balance later on. It makes up for all that initial effort. So you have to recognize that the first few years will be tough, and then just think about the future benefits. Reference letters, these are some questions that were posed. If you've been following your passion and are happy with your accomplishments, this is largely irrelevant. It doesn't matter who writes that letter, you will get good letters. I never did anything in my 26-year-long teaching career specifically to target or please a letter writer. You just keep doing the good work, that'll happen. How do you find them? Well, it's a fairly obvious thing. Well-known people in the field with whom you've had discussions and are aware of your work. Those are the people who will write for you. Does teaching matter to them? This was a question posed to me. The more important question is, does teaching matter to you? You have to demonstrate that. This is the more important question. If you want the writer to say something special about your teaching, do something special over simply saying, oh, you taught them real-world examples and got good evaluations. If they see in your research that what you're exploring is some esoteric nanoscale concept, and you've never actually seen a heat exchanger in your life, and then you claim that you did real-world examples in your class, it's hardly credible. People like me who've been in this business for a long time can smell bullshit within 10 minutes of opening a tenure package. So don't try to fool the letter writers. Letter writers are busy. I write about 75 to 100 letters every year. These are letters for undergraduates, graduates, postdocs, award nominations, promotions, tenure, and so on. And I wish institutes got some religion and sent us small packages. There's a university in the Midwest, a Big Ten university that shall not remain, that shall remain unnamed, that sends me 400 pages long dossier of everything you did, including going to the bathroom. I wish they didn't do that. Please convey to your administrators to send us streamlined packages. What are these letter writers looking for? You are achieving some near steady state. You should have some new papers with your students. You should have some students at or close to graduation. You should have demonstrated some competence in teaching, some new teaching innovations, and the scientific community knows who you are as a player. And no one gave you tenure. You got it. It's your tenure. Congrats. Okay? And then once you get tenure, it's a generally anticlimactic process. Okay? It's not a reason to take a vacation and check out. Your work should be your vacation. You are enjoying the work, the thing that you enjoy the most. So that is your vacation. And give forward, build a community, not a kingdom. Okay, that community is what comes into play. And I'll leave you with this last slide. Whenever I'm feeling that I'm some hot commodity, then I watch this little video clip.
$50 for 50 bucks. No. This is a Rochefoucauld, the thinnest water-resistant watch in the world. Singularly unique, sculptured in design, handcrafted in Switzerland, and water-resistant to 3 atmospheres. This is the sports watch of the 80s. $6,955 retail. You got a receipt? But it tells time simultaneously in Monte Carlo, Beverly Hills, London, Paris, Rome, and Stade. In Philadelphia, it's worth 50 bucks. Just give me the money.
Okay, I'll stop with that. I'm sorry I went too long. Patty, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Srinivas. I'll open the floor for questions. So just unmute and ask. And I see that you're unmuted.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sure. I really appreciate your presentation, Dr. Garimella. And I do have, at least I think I have one question regarding mentoring students. It's basically at the early stage. I'm just noticing that, for example, for making presentations, writing manuscripts, or even doing some data analysis, it almost takes like twice as long time to advise the student to finish it rather than I just do it myself. So sometimes like just when the lazy part that, okay, you do the experiments and I do the analysis and then let's get something out. That's fast, but then after this process, students still don't know how to do that. I just, but sometimes because of the pressure of the project and the timeline, we need to get things out. I just don't know like how to balance the time allocated for advising versus the productivity.
So this is something that all of us faced at the early part of our careers. I fully understand this situation, but that temptation to do it yourself is a really, really bad thing. Please don't fall into that temptation. It might proceed slowly. You have to let the students make mistakes. That's how they develop. And you just have to plan your time a little bit better so that they can actually do some decent amount of analysis. Now, this doesn't mean that you won't participate in it. Let them make that mistake, and then your contribution is to correct it. Okay?
Gotcha.
So don't abandon that, because there's two things. The work won't get done, and the student won't get trained, and the student will feel like crap that, oh, the faculty member is doing that. So, but
Okay.
the silver lining in that is, after you've done this once or twice, then the student will do it better than you can. I guarantee.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And so presumably you have several students, and different students are at different stages of this. So some students are actually working faster than you expect them to, and the new students are working slower, and it balances things out.
Gotcha. Thank you. Really appreciate that comment. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
May I ask it? So this is Guan Yu. I'm a postdoc associate from MIT. So I'm still very, very early in this tenure track, and invited by Matteo. He's very kind. I was working with him. So my question is about your step 0. So how prepared would you expect the candidate for a faculty position? So how prepared did you expect that person to be? So for example, of course, I would like to try my best to check all the boxes you list in step 0, but at some circumstances, I cannot satisfy all of them. Then how prepared did you expect that person to be?
This is a very good question. The research and teaching plans and the research accomplishment statements that we are seeing in faculty applications these days are a million times more than what we used to see when, 15, 20 years ago. So yes, I think the bar is higher. It's not it's not so much how many things you're promising, but your level of confidence in what you are proposing to do. So I don't think you need more than 2 or 3 ideas, really. This is my own perspective. You don't need 2 or 3 ideas, more than 2 or 3 ideas, because you can't work on more than 2 or 3 ideas in your first year anyway. But whatever ideas you propose them in a credible fashion so that people can actually say, yes, this person is going to make that contribution. When you write that application, one of the things that I'm looking for is, we are interviewing several different candidates, right? And then after that interview is done, there's only so much of that we will remember. Make sure you've left the search committee with enough nuggets that if we hire this person, this is the contribution that person will make. This is the additional capability to the school that he or she will add that we don't have. So focus on that. Not quantity, but again, make a credible proposal for 2 or 3 things that you plan to do, about which you are really sure and passionate.
Thank you, Dr. Garimella.
And I also want to encourage some of the senior faculty to chime in if they have maybe different experiences and opinions, because obviously not everyone is in the same shoes and everyone has different situations. So it's always very helpful to hear different perspectives as well. I'm not wanting to discredit here Srinivas, but I do think it helps to hear different perspectives. That was just a general comment for the senior faculty on the call.
I can add a comment overall. I think it's, I appreciate Srinivas sharing his thoughts, and it's really his presentation very much reflects him, right? And for obvious reason. And it has a lot of prescriptive steps to follow. I just want to alert everyone that not everyone is Srinivas Garimella. So some of you may not follow prescriptive procedure. Maybe it's a different trajectory that you follow personally. It may not fit your view of the world, your personality, your emotional state and such. So please do not copy step 0, step 1, step 2, and check mark. I want to alert everyone. It's actually dangerous. On the other hand, really what I wanted to reiterate, I think the message is overall great. And I just wanted to make sure it is not lost in being a very lengthy presentation. And this message to me really, so the whole tenure process, it's not just necessarily about, it's actually a process of discovering yourself as well. It's not just climbing the mountain. So I think the message that I think was in bold in one of the slides, maybe slide number 11 from Srinivas' presentation, is really evaluation of tenure. It comes to one simple question: do you matter? And that's really, this is truly, and actually it's very easy to answer this question. It's literally, if you look around your colleagues, and you can, even if it's junior faculty member, you can look at a senior faculty member and can ask the same question: do you matter? And it's really ultimately very easy to arrive without H indexes, all other things to this conclusion. It's really your trajectory. This is one thing. The second thing I wanted to mention, I think one of the most dangerous, maybe it's all precious to get all of these check boxes, but really the most important things for you as a faculty member is your reputation. Developing it's difficult, losing very easy. So I always would emphasize, think before you speak multiple times, which doesn't mean that you should not speak. You should speak, because otherwise you will not matter. Remember, and you have to matter. So, but so the reputation is number 2. And the third thing that I wanted to kind of maybe bring it a little bit, lighten up the discussion, all of the advice that Srinivas gave, and if you want to see it in a little bit more entertained manner, just watch the musical Hamilton. And I think if you follow the trajectory of Hamilton, how he made himself indispensable. That's what tenure is at the institution. Make yourself indispensable. That will, I think, very lovely support what Srinivas said. I mean, literally, I think that's all I have to say. But we all follow very different trajectories.
Yeah, fully agree with you, Andre. Fully agree with you.
I actually had one question, and either of you can answer that. So you mentioned to have a diverse research portfolio, but at the same time, junior faculty always hear that they should be known for one thing. That sounds a little bit contradictory. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I tried to address that a little bit in the slides. Let me restate that. Your portfolio should evolve. It shouldn't just be a dartboard because someone told you to do different things. For example, I'll just give you my example. I worked in the area of condensation, microscale condensation, right? Many of you know me because of that. But I also worked on absorption heat pumps, which there are some ties between them. Both of them are heat and mass transfer. One of them is more applications oriented. One of them is more fundamentals. What I learn in this, I'm able to apply to that. What I learn in that, I'm able to apply to this. So that diversity can come not in completely different topics, but one might be an applications oriented thing, another may be a fundamental discipline thing, and just sort of somewhat related ideas. Because yes, I agree, you are just one person, and whatever you do, you should do well. So this is how I have viewed that. And then career has evolved. It has gone from absorption to adsorption to thermal storage to electrical storage and so on. It just comes over time. That's my perspective on this.
I'll give you mine if you want, Patty. I don't think there is a controversy or there is any contradiction in this statement. I actually, maybe I will try to restate maybe what Srinivas was trying to say, or he may correct me that this is not what he was trying to say. I think he was trying to say is don't be opportunistic and try to go after every single, oh, maybe that's the one that I'm gonna jump in and that's where I'm gonna shine nicely, or maybe this. The reason why I'm saying that that's mostly the focus, because I'll give you a completely opposite picture to Srinivas. I've never done the same thing ever. And I go to every different field where I start oftentimes at the very bottom. But there is a metric that I use. The reason why I start using or going into those fields is not because other people practice this, but because I see this being extremely interesting. And I usually think that I have a new ideas how to change this field. And I burn in some things. Sometimes I win. And I'm trying to win, but this is my personality. I remember also try to emphasize, you gotta fit your personality. Very important. But you don't want to become if you wash it, you don't want to dilute yourself and be opportunistic. These two things that what I think Dr. Garimella was trying to emphasize. If you can do 10 things very well and be known in this, go for it. Unfortunately, not all of us are able to do this well. So start slow and go forward with that.
You have to be true to yourself. That's very, very important. Don't try to just do it because it's fashionable or something like that. When I was early in my career and I was doing sort of enhanced heat transfer and some sort of refrigeration system type of work, which I still do, some people would say, do you really want to be a plumber? I decided that I enjoy being a plumber and I'll be the best damn plumber there is on earth. And, I haven't achieved that, but I enjoy what I do. And it works for me. It may not work for you. So this is you. This is for you. Tenure is not for anybody else. That self-discovery thing that Andre mentioned and I showed in my slides is you're doing this for you, nobody else.
With any other questions?
In my other comment, so when I said tenure, actually maybe the best thing that happened to you. By doing so, you realize a lot of things that you really are supposed to be doing, and you lock yourself in profession for the next 40 years. You think, man, I already became tenured. I'm not going to give these things up, and that's very natural for people oftentimes too, because this whole security of this job can be very dangerous. So I think ability to do things in a way that you can give these things up. And I advocate actually not having tenure, I personally, in any university. I think we don't need to have tenure, I personally believe, in universities, especially in engineering. But that's a separate question. I think your question that of your panel was how to be successful as a professor. That really was the question. And tenure is just a check mark about that.
I think Sean, you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, I wanted perspective from kind of everyone. How do you balance high expectations with still being encouraging and not threatening? What are some things you do to check yourself, I guess, what are some things that you think of that you've learned, that approaches that work to balance this?
Yeah, it's, like in any walk of life, you have to do it in stages. You give small assignments. So when students come to my lab first, 99% of the time, they are not working on their PhD project on day one. I spend a semester, maybe even 9 months, sort of probing them and exploring different ideas with them. They spend time with other students in the lab. And then when we understand what their capabilities, their interests, and so on are, then we sort of channel that into that PhD project. So if you build it up in small steps, A, you will know what their strengths are, and B, you will give them that ladder to climb so that it's not one big expectation at the same time. And then there are some things they won't be good at. And so you make sure through this discovery process at what they excel and try to choose the project that works well for them in that propensity.
Thank you. So that makes sense. A small project, but a quality small project.
Yeah.
Well, I would also emphasize an additional aspect to this. There is one of the best mentors in your research group. It's not you, but actually other students that working with you. And when you started, you probably don't have too many of those senior maybe students or have this level of maturity to provide additional level of mentoring. But as simple thing as, for example, what a progress you would expect from a student, ability to reflect on things, how much work to put in. If you have regular group meetings, this becomes very clear. Students see how their peers perform. Are they doing it differently? Are they kind of not really, what exactly they're missing on? And you have to provide an atmosphere of enough confidence and comfort for them to reach out. So they actually could ask you very frankly this question: what exactly, how could I actually get there? Or what am I missing? And also reach out to other group members. So don't forget that you are not the only one in this group. There are more people who engage in the process.
I can usually, when I go visit universities, although we aren't doing that much anymore, within the first 5 minutes of walking into a lab, I can tell whether this is a good cohesive group of students or not. You have to encourage that collaboration. Basically, whenever visitors come to my lab, half the time or even more than half the time, one student is giving the presentation of another student's project. They all become very familiar with each other's work. And this helps. And this helps you in mentoring because, again, the senior students and the junior ones are working together to the same overall goal. And they leave your lab not just knowing one project, but they know the entire research area that way. So if any of you have questions or would like to talk on a more one-on-one basis with questions, I'm happy to do that. You can just send me an email and we can set something up. But I'm glad you guys endured through this long presentation, and I hope it was somewhat useful to you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Srinivas. I think all of us, and also if you look at the chat, those of us who had already to leave, A lot of praise and a lot of thank yous. So I'll definitely echo that. And I also do want to encourage everyone. What I notice is two things that Trinova said. Don't compare yourself to others, and don't be afraid to reach out to senior faculty, right? It has to be us taking the initiative to reach out. But I've never had anyone reject my outreach. So don't be afraid of doing that.